This story I wanted to dive into, got a little bit of attention, but I actually think it is super fascinating. We are in the middle right now of what we all told you would be coming, and it is the Biden's mental and physical cognition. Everybody knew how bad it was, and some of the stories that were not told when Biden was still in office are now being told. And there is a new story out that I think should have gotten more attention than it has so far. And I wanted to talk about this with you. New upcoming book that is out about Biden's ongoing mental and physical struggles in the White House. Sunday, New York Times, I read it. This is coming from a couple of different reporters. The book, How Trump Retook the White House and Democrats Lost America, says that in 2024, February, that there was a substantial debate inside of the White House about Joe Biden doing a cognitive test because in February of that year, if you'll remember, they came out with the Her report, which described the president as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. At that point in time, the story was becoming such an issue that they thought about having Biden take a cognition test, but they were afraid that he would not be able to pass. Now, this is in February of 2024. He still, Buck, had nearly a full year as president of the United States, and they did back channel conversations according to the book, and the physician said, I'm not going to lie if he fails it, basically. And so they didn't believe that Biden would be able to pass the test. This is the New York Times reporting a book that's going to be out soon. This is one of the things that is in the book. If this is true, this is a cover-up that I believe would be criminal. Because if you have a president of the United States and his staff, which is publicly proclaiming that he's sharp as a tack and that he's going to be able to run for re-election and be president for 4 more years, but privately, that same staff that's saying that publicly is afraid that if he took a cognition test, and these cognition tests are not, we're not talking about the SAT, the ACT rolled into one. It's not an AP course. It is a very basic test that elderly people sometimes take to see whether or not they have severe dementia or whether their mental and physical capabilities are enough for them to, instance, be able to live at home or drive a car, these kind of things. Buck, this is staggering if this is true, because it would mean, thankfully, we got through it, but that what we were all talking about was likely true, and that for a year, the White House was trying to cover up the entire last year of his presidency, that many of his top aides didn't even think that he could pass a basic cognition test. And that's the reason they didn't have him do it.
Well, that's because everybody knew that this guy had dementia, but the entire system, the entire apparatus was completely enmeshed in the lie. And they knew, right? What's going to be interesting here is how do they get past this? And some of you, I will say, have been pointing out, look, we're going to talk about the tariffs and the latest. You know, the latest is that Trump knows what he's doing and it's all fine. So everyone needs to calm down a bit. But we'll talk about the news of the day, of course, with respect to that. But why does this story still matter so much? It matters because it shows everybody just how deep the rot was between the Democrat Party and the corporate Democrat media, the old media institutions that still, even until this last election, I think, Clay, had more of a claim to, oh, we're trustworthy and neutral than they should have. People had wised up a lot. But now, if you believe the New York Times isn't pushing a left-wing agenda, you're just not very smart, right? If you believe that the Washington Post is objective journalism, even Jeff Bezos doesn't believe the Washington Post. He owns it, and he doesn't think it's objective journalism based on what we've seen in the last election cycle alone. He's figured this out, right? So I think, Clay, what's interesting is, there's this reporting about the cover-up. And it comes out now, and this is going to be one thing, this will be contentious, especially for anybody who's trying to say, well, look at all the good journalism we're doing now about this. All of this was known and knowable before the election. Real journalism would have been telling us about this before the American people were voting, right? Because it doesn't just go to Joe Biden, it goes to the credibility of the pro-Kamala media and all of the stories around her and all the things that were going on at that time. So, you can't try to rig the game. I watched my beloved New York Knicks last night get a huge win, Clay. Huge win over the Boston Celtics.
They came back from 20 points down. When's the last time you watched it full? Did you watch the whole game or just the end of it?
No, my brothers texted me and said, stop being a communist. They're about to win. There's 5 minutes left or something.
Oh, okay.
And I said, okay, brothers. My brothers are the normal ones in the family. They were watching. So I turned it on. But, imagine if it came out that one of those teams had tried to rig the game by paying off the refs. You're not a hero for telling us that after the game is over and you've lost.
A year later.
or I think, and a year later. That's not heroic, okay? That's cleaning up after the parade of elephants and horses, so to speak, has already gone by. And that's what's going on here. It is cleanup on aisle journalism. And we're going to have this out, I think, in time with anybody who sees it otherwise. Oh, by the way, just one more thing, Clay. If they could have gotten a doctor to lie, they absolutely would have gone forward with it. Because all these people have their jobs riding on whether Biden can pass this cognitive test.
The doctor, that's what I wanted to reference. This is according to the New York Times. This was reporting on this book that's going to come out. Mr. Biden's longtime doctor, Kevin O'Connor, told aides he would not take the 81-year-old president's political standing into consideration when treating him.
Good for him, by the way.
Yeah,
that guy is actually a hero in this story. When it mattered, he had integrity.
The Bidens have declined to comment on this story that is coming out in this book.
Can I just throw something out there too? Sorry, you've got me fired up about this story. Clay sent me this story, and now I'm fired up about this story. Clay, you know who who maybe the chief villain in this whole narrative is going to be? Jill Biden.
Well, I've been arguing that for a while.
You have, but I'm saying in this book, it's going to completely align with your Jill Biden is a chief villain take. But I think we're going to get some of those details now. Can you imagine hiding your husband's dementia from the country in a re-election camp? We're not even talking about can he just get to the end, right? That would be bad enough. Okay, just 6 more months, Joe. Just 6 more months. Clay, they were telling us he should be president for 4 more years.
There are 2 other things in this story that are in the book that I think is Mike Donnellan, a senior advisor to Biden, had worked for him since the 80s, told the Harvard Political Review in March, even when they were worried about this cognitive test, every day I keep seeing him doing the job. I still think he's the best person to be president today. David Axelrod, top advisor to President Obama, called into question in July 2022 whether Biden would be able to serve another 4 years. He said the stark reality is the president's going to be closer to 90 than 80 at the end of the second term. It would be a major issue. That comment, according to the book, prompted an angry call to Axelrod from Ron Klain, then Mr. Biden's chief of staff. He said, there's no Obama out there, Axe. Who's going to do it if he doesn't do it? That is why they covered. It's not only, Buck, that they were aware and they wanted to maintain power and everything else. It's that I think they realized there was no one else who could do better against Trump than Biden. So they were willing to weekend at Bernie's to Joe Biden as long as they could keep this lie going. And that's because there wasn't somebody in the wings that they thought was better. And they ended up being correct because Kamala couldn't do it either.
I'll also point this out, Clay. I know you're with me on this, but I just think we have to keep on reminding everybody. Because remember, the people that went along with this lie, they all still run the Democrat Party. They're all still calling the shots at most of, the non-Fox networks. Although, actually, congrats to Newsmax and News Nation for all the gains. They're making a lot of gains, and they've earned it because they've built their brands at a time when these other brands are just going into the side of the mountain at high speed. But Clay, if they could have held off on the debate until the election,
Yeah.
they would have. Even
That's
more
still the
than that,
story. That's still the story I want to know more about. Why did they decide to do it?
and I think it was the biggest blunder in political history. Clay, they would have gotten away with this in my mind. Now, I don't know if he would have beaten Trump. That's a different question. I don't think so. Look at the results in the election, but they would have dragged him to election day. All they had to do was say Joe refuses to platform an election denier. You have to say it like that because you have to have no testosterone when you say it. Joe refuses to platform an election denier. The American people will decide at the ballot box. Clay, they could have kept Biden in the seat. And I'll say this, it would have, if they had done that, forget about the debate, it would have been a better showing for them than it was with Kamala. I think no question in my mind.
I think that's still the great untold story. Why did they insist? Remember, it was their call. Why did they insist on the early debate? Because they're lying about his mental and physical cognition already. He'd already locked up the overall nomination. There was nothing they could have done to him. If they had just waited to do a debate until September, October, it would have destroyed his chances, I think, of reelection because everybody would have seen it and it would have been impossible to replace him at that point in time. But why not? Or we said it for a while. We thought that Biden might say, I'm not even going to platform Trump because his ideas are too crazy. People have seen this debate already. They know what he thinks. They know what I think. I believe that might have been the better play because then they could have kept the lie going.
I think if you and I were running the Biden 2024 campaign, talk about a thought experiment. And we had sold our souls, and the whole point was anything, because if we believed, let's say, that Trump was the end of the republic, which isn't that just even more insane now that we look around, we're like, you mean the country is healing and things are going great? Yeah, that's the end of the republic. We could have gotten Biden to election day. Look at all this stuff they were able to suppress. They could. I agree with you. Who pushed forward the early debate? Because there are only two options. The biggest own goal, self-inflicted wound in modern American politics, or maybe somebody was like, I just can't be a part of this anymore. I think that's less likely. I do, but it's not impossible.
That would have been the House of Cards part. If this the television show that Netflix did back in the day, the House of Cards version would be, we're going to trot him out there and we're going to let him go up in flames. But it is crazy to me that they let this guy debate in June of 2027. I just think it's crazy. We'll talk about this. We'll take some of your calls. AI everywhere. If your business isn't using it, you're losing money, productivity, and a competitive edge. NetSuite helps you control costs and increase efficiency like our federal government's trying to do. NetSuite, #1 cloud business management system out there, harnessing the power of AI to give you that competitive edge. Even the best run businesses could use a little optimizing, maybe even streamlining. With NetSuite, you'll gain clarity on what actions to take. With technology moving so fast, you're probably wondering where to even begin. NetSuite brings accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one efficient suite instead of paying for multiple systems. Begin by going to netsuite.com/Clay. NetSuite is spelled NETSUITE. netsuite.com/Clay brings you to a website where you can download the free CFO's guide to AI and machine learning. It's fast. It's easy. It's what's next. Lead your company into the future. Get the AI edge with NetSuite by Oracle. That's netsuite.com/Clay.